Every deception is built on a single impossible moment of choice. For Cora, that choice was a dress, a cascade of ice blue silk, stolen for a single night of borrowed freedom. She was a maid, invisible, destined for destitution. But tonight she was Lady Beatrice, trading her wool apron for a mask and the attention of the most formidable man in London, Rhys, the cynical Marquess. What happens when the mask slips? What happens when the man you're supposed to deceive is the only person who truly sees the real you? Dive into a world of hidden identities, glittering ballrooms, and dangerous secrets. You won't want to miss a single word of this journey from the scullery to the scandal sheets. Hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss the moment her world and her heart shatters. My lady's hands were shaking as she clutched the ice blue silk of the gown. You will do it, Cora. You must. If I have to dance with that vile man one more time, I shall throw myself from the balcony. The words were an order, a plea, and a threat all at once. Without her reference, I was nothing. A ghost with no home, no future. For one night, I would cease to be a ghost. I would wear silk instead of wool, and my name would be hers. The air in Lady Beatrice's bedroom was thick with the scent of lavender and panic. I knelt on the plush Turkish carpet, struggling to secure the laces on her delicate ivory slippers, but her frantic movements made the task impossible. Her elaborate blonde curls, painstakingly arranged by me an hour ago, were already coming loose at the temples. A single pearl from her choker had fallen onto the floor, a tiny, perfect sphere of opulence in the midst of her distress. Cora, are you even listening? She snapped, her voice thin with anxiety. I met her gaze, unflinching. Yes, my lady. I am listening. She took a shaky breath and gestured toward the gown draped over a silk-upholstered chaise longue. It was a masterpiece of haute couture, a cascade of ice blue silk embroidered with silver thread that mimicked frost on a winter morning. It was meant to be her triumph tonight. Instead, it had become the symbol of her desperation. The Marquess is attending the ball, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. My father received the invitation this morning, the most eligible man in all of London, and that monster is still circling me like a vulture. She didn't need to name him. The dreaded suitor, the lecherous Viscount, was a shadow that hung over our entire household. His debt-ridden family had made an alliance with hers, and his crude, heavy-handed advances had become a source of profound dread for my mistress. He was a man who looked at a woman not as a person, but as a transaction, an object to be acquired, and she was meant to be his. I cannot bear it, she whimpered, wringing her hands. I cannot marry him. He is cruel, and he will ruin me. I said nothing, my mind working through the implications. I had been in her service for 5 years, an orphan hired as a scullery maid and promoted to lady's maid on a whim after she saw me reading a book of poetry. I was an object of fleeting amusement for her, a curiosity. But now I was an essential piece of a desperate plan. So you will go in my place, she declared, her eyes widening with a feverish intensity. The Marquess has never seen me up close. He knows me only by reputation. He is expecting to find the lovely Lady Beatrice, so that is who you will be. My hair is the color of old straw, not the color of moonlight, but a well-placed mask will solve that, and you have a certain grace about you, Cora. He will be none the wiser. My throat felt dry. But the risk, my lady, if we are discovered. Her fear was quickly replaced by a fleeting glimpse of her inherent selfishness. She saw me not as a person, but as a vessel, a tool to be used. If you refuse, I will dismiss you without a reference, and I will make sure no one else in London ever hires you. The threat was a hammer blow. Being a maid was difficult, but it was a life. Without a reference, I would have nothing. I would be destitute. A part of me, a small, foolish part that I kept buried deep, fluttered at the thought of it. A taste of a life I had only read about in the novels she discarded. To wear silk, to walk in a ballroom, to be seen not as a servant, but as a lady. I looked at the gown, at the glimmering fabric that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I ran a hand over the impossibly smooth texture, a sharp contrast to the rough cotton of my own dress. Very well, my lady, I said, my voice low but firm. The decision was made. For one night, I would be someone else. For one night, I would be Lady Beatrice. And in doing so, I would be forced to face her deepest fears as my own, and risk a humiliation that would make her life of misery seem like a distant dream. The dress was no longer a beautiful garment. It was a cage of deception. My lady's hands were shaking as she laced the corset, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from exertion. As she pulled the ribbons taut, I felt the familiar constriction of the garment, but for the first time it didn't feel like an iron cage. It felt like a foundation. As she finished, I didn't recognize the woman in the glass. I had grown so used to seeing a smudge of dust on my cheek, the slight stoop of a servant, the weary look in my eyes. But now, the woman who stared back was statuesque, her posture straight, her shoulders back. The dress was a cascade of ice blue silk, a fabric so fine it felt like spun air against my skin. It shimmered with every shift of light, the silver threads winking like stars. My simple brown hair, which I usually kept in a practical tight bun, was now a voluminous crown of curls, artfully pinned to mimic my mistress's elaborate style. But it was the mask that truly sealed the deal. A delicate silver thing, shaped like a butterfly, that hid the nervous tremors in my lips and let my eyes, which were truly my own, tell a different story. Beatrice adjusted the mask over my face with a final impatient pat. Just remember to keep your chin up and your mouth shut unless spoken to. And when you do speak, recall the names of my boring acquaintances. She gave me a once-over, her eyes filled with a complicated mix of relief and resentment. For a moment, I saw a flash of fear in her gaze, fear that my deception might work too well. Her own gown, a simple white muslin, looked like a shroud in comparison to the one I was wearing. I simply nodded, my heart pounding a rhythm against the silk. We made our way down the grand staircase, the heavy, muffled sounds of the ballroom growing louder with each step. The air that met me at the foot of the stairs was not the scent of lavender from my mistress's room, but a heady wave of perfume and arrogance. 100 conversations, 100 different stories, mingled in the air. The crystal chandeliers overhead scattered a million diamond-bright fragments of light across the parquet floor, illuminating a sea of bobbing heads, glittering jewels, and whispered secrets. I had been in ballrooms before, of course, as a shadow, a ghost. I had refilled glasses and collected discarded plates, moving silently in the background while the world of the ton danced on. But to be on the floor, to be a part of the spectacle, it was a terrifying, exhilarating sensation. I felt 100 eyes on me, judging the drape of my dress, the tilt of my head, the grace of my walk. I was a forgery, and I was terrified of being discovered. Then my eyes fell upon him. He was standing slightly apart from the crowd, leaning against a gilded column, as if the very act of being present was a burden. He was devastatingly handsome, with dark hair that fell in a casual wave across his brow and a jawline carved from marble. The cut of his formal evening coat was flawless, yet he wore it with an air of disinterest. He was watching the dancers with an expression of profound boredom. He looked like a man who had seen everything, done everything, and was now just waiting for it all to end. His eyes, the color of stormy sea, glided over the crowd, dismissing faces and gowns with a single, uninterested glance. They landed on me for a moment, then moved on. He had no reason to look twice. He was the Marquess. He was expecting the lovely Lady Beatrice, not a ghost in borrowed silk. He asked me to dance. It was not a request, but a statement of fact, as if it was the inevitable conclusion to his scanning of the room. It was part of his plan, a duty. He had to court Lady Beatrice, and dancing was the customary first step. His hand, warm and firm, rested at the small of my back as he guided me onto the floor. I was a puppet, and he was pulling the strings. I was painfully aware of the distance between us, a space that felt as wide as a chasm. He looked over my shoulder at the crowd, his eyes still holding that familiar boredom. I felt a surge of panic. He would see right through me, the imposter. I had to speak, to pretend. "The orchestra plays beautifully, does it not, my lord?" I said, reciting a line my mistress had coached me on. It was a flimsy, empty phrase, and the moment it left my lips, I hated it. He glanced down at me, a flicker of something, perhaps mild annoyance in his eyes. "Predictably, perhaps," he murmured. "Their passion is professional, not genuine. It is why their music lacks soul." The words struck a chord within me. For a moment, I forgot to be Lady Beatrice, forgot the list of boring acquaintances, forgot the fear. My mind went to a worn book in my room, a discarded history of the arts. "Perhaps they would find more inspiration in a different composer," I said, my voice betraying my true self. "The failed opera of M. Du Bois, for instance, a beautiful tragedy, but too ambitious for its time. It said his entire heart was in that work." Rhys stilled. His eyes, now focused entirely on me, were no longer bored. They were searching, intrigued. The distance between us closed as he leaned in, his voice low. I am unfamiliar with it. You have a particular passion for composers, Lady Beatrice? A laugh, light and genuine, escaped me. A fascination with all things that fail grandly. It seems more honest than all this success. I gestured with my free hand to the glittering, perfect crowd around us. This is a sea of perfection. It's dreadfully dull. All one hears is gossip anyway, a constant drone of who is marrying whom and whose dress is more expensive. A half smile touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes at first, but it was there, a subtle shift in his otherwise weary face. You find it tedious? Gossip is just the currency of the insecure, I said, a line I had once read in a novel about a clever spy. They trade it to feel wealthy, but they are all still poor in substance. He stopped dancing completely, just for a moment, and his hand tightened on mine, an accidental, possessive grip that sent a jolt through me. You are not what I expected, he whispered, his eyes searching mine behind the mask, no longer seeing a debutante, but something else entirely. Something real. He began to dance again, but this time he danced closer. Our movements were no longer a formal ballet, but a conversation in motion. He laughed, a rich, genuine sound that drew a few curious glances. He was leaning so close that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my cheek. From across the room, hidden behind a large palm, the real Lady Beatrice watched. Her plan was working. The Marquess was utterly captivated. But the sight of him, with his head so close to mine, that filled her with a new, agonizing terror. She had gambled on a forgery, a ghost, and the ghost was stealing the one thing she wanted most. Her eyes narrowed with a furious panic. Her beautiful, desperate plan was working too well. And just like that, the lie became dangerous. Lady Beatrice wanted a Marquess. Cora found a connection. What started as a duty for Rhys, a tedious dance with a debutante, has become a riveting verbal duel with the only woman in the room capable of challenging him. They are drawn to each other, two kindred spirits masked by custom and deception. But the clock is ticking. The dreadful Viscount is cutting across the ballroom, and he won't be denied his intended bride. How long can the masquerade last? And when the truth is revealed, will Rhys be furious at the deceit, or captivated by the courage of the woman beneath the silk? This concludes part 1. Join us immediately for part 2, where the dance ends and the scandal begins.